Welcome to my channel Karma Romance Stories. Please like, subscribe for more videos.
3 weeks after I buried my wife, I thought the hardest part of my life was over. I was wrong. My own son walked into my living room with a folder in his hand and calmly told me we were selling my house. He believed I had nowhere else to go. He believed grief had made me weak. What he never knew was that my wife had spent years preparing for this exact moment. She left me one secret: a quiet cabin beside an Ontario lake and $312,000 hidden from everyone except me. I said nothing. I simply smiled because while my son was making plans for my future, I had already chosen a different life. What happened next changed our family forever. The funeral ended on a cold, rainy afternoon. Friends hugged me before quietly driving away. The house suddenly became silent. Every room reminded me of my wife. Her favorite chair sat beside the window. Her coffee mug was still on the kitchen shelf. 43 years of marriage had disappeared in a single week. Before she passed away, she held my hand and whispered that one day I would understand why she asked me never to tell anyone about the cabin in Ontario. She made me promise. I kept that promise even after she was gone. The cabin was small but beautiful. It overlooked a peaceful lake surrounded by tall pine trees. We bought it years earlier after selling a piece of land. She insisted the paperwork stay private. She always said people behave differently when money enters the conversation. She was right. 3 weeks after the funeral, my son arrived with his wife. Neither of them asked how I was feeling. Instead, they placed papers on my dining table. "Dad, this house is too big for you now," my son said. "We already found a buyer. You will move into a retirement apartment near us. It is for your own good." I looked at the papers. They had already spoken to a real estate agent without asking me. His wife smiled politely but avoided eye contact. It felt like everything had been planned before they even entered my house. I quietly asked who decided this. My son answered. "We all agreed. You cannot manage this place anymore." I looked around the home my wife and I built together. Every wall held memories. Every room carried part of our lives. I simply replied, "Thank you for your concern, but I already have other plans." He laughed softly. "What plans, Dad?" I smiled. "I already moved north." The room became completely silent. My son frowned. "What do you mean?" I stood up and walked to my bedroom. Inside the closet was a small envelope my wife had prepared years earlier. I returned and placed it on the table. Inside were photographs of the Ontario Lake cabin, property documents, bank statements showing the inheritance she left only for me. $312,000. Their expressions on their faces changed instantly. My daughter-in-law whispered, "You never told us." I answered calmly, "That was exactly the point. My wife wanted one place where nobody could pressure us. She believed one day someone might mistake kindness for weakness." My son tried to explain. "Dad, we only wanted to help." I nodded. "Maybe. But helping begins by asking, not deciding." I packed one suitcase that evening. The next morning, I drove north. The highway stretched through forests and small towns until I reached the lake. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. The cabin looked exactly as I remembered. Morning sunlight reflected across the water. Birds filled the air with sound instead of arguments. Inside, I found another letter from my wife hidden behind a picture frame. She wrote, "If you are reading this, it means you kept your promise. Do not spend your remaining years trying to satisfy everyone else. Live where your heart is quiet. Forgive when you can, but never surrender your dignity." I sat on the porch for hours holding that letter. Weeks passed. I repaired the dock, painted the cabin, learned the names of every neighbor. Nobody cared how much money I had. They only cared whether I needed help carrying groceries or fixing a broken fence. Then one afternoon my son arrived unexpectedly. He looked tired. He admitted selling my house had never been about helping me. Financial problems had pushed him into making selfish decisions. Debt had clouded his judgment. For the first time since the funeral, he apologized without excuses. I listened quietly. Then I handed him a fishing rod. We spent the entire afternoon on the lake saying very little. Sometimes healing begins with silence instead of speeches. Over the following months, we slowly rebuilt trust. Not because money solved our problems, because honesty finally replaced pride. My wife understood something neither of us understood while she was alive. A family can survive hardship. It cannot survive hidden greed. Her final gift was never the money. It was the lesson. Protect your peace. Protect your dignity. And never allow grief to make your decisions for you. Years later, my grandchildren visited the cabin every summer. They never asked how much it was worth. They only remembered fishing at sunrise, campfires beside the lake, their grandfather telling stories under the stars. That became my true inheritance. Not the money, not the property, but a peaceful life built on respect, honesty, and love. Strong ending. If this story teaches us anything, it is that real wealth is not measured by houses or bank accounts. Real wealth is having the wisdom to protect your peace and the courage to stand firm when others try to control your future. Sometimes the greatest victory is walking away quietly while everyone else believes they have already won.